Look, you are listening to ABC Illawarra. One of the subject of tonight's Luminaries panel discussion put on by the University of Wollongong is beating the hackers. And one of the experts you can learn from will be Professor Katina Michael, renowned expert in emerging technologies and their social implications. I spoke to Professor Katina Michael ahead of the panel discussion tonight. And she reflected on the current nature of scamming and hacking in the community and how it can't just be about technology alone.
We just have to postulate if this keeps going in terms of frequency, accessibility and new ways of penetrating traditional infrastructures, we're going to see a crippling of our digital economy. And then what? Are we going to switch off the internet? And the answer is we cannot. So it just can't be a focus on technology. I think that's what you've just identified, that we have traditionally focused on new technological techniques to curb, attacks in networks and in systems. But we just can't think technology anymore.
I feel like there are three ways in which we can be victims of hacking, of scams, etc., via the internet, I suppose is the best way to sum it up simply. One is the way sometimes they get a hold of your credit card details and they literally just steal money out of your account and buy things from Amazon or whatever. That happens. You can usually get the money back via the bank you have your credit card with. Another is it requires some participation from you and you are duped in some way into clicking a link or providing some details. Then there's hackers stealing your data. Are they kind of the three things we should be looking out for, the three modes through which we can have things stolen from us?
I'll tell you what, you've done a good job there, Melinda. I do think card-not-present fraud traditionally was what was occurring, say, in the 2000s, and occasionally we will be subjected to credit card numbers and credit card use when we have full possession of our credit card, but our number is being used and those three-digit codes at the back of the card are being used in an unauthorized fashion. I would really still say one of the best ways to curb this is to check your credit card statement. Most people don't have time. They don't think that's a priority. I would say it's much as a priority today, even though the banks are working in a great way to look at your patterns of movement and transactions. So, all of a sudden, if there are these transactions happening from a country you don't frequent, or you haven't actually told your bank, I'm going overseas and using my card overseas, there will probably be a block on the card. So patterns of use are being increasingly observed by banks and financial institutions, and they're doing a great job. But I still would say those credit card numbers are being used online, and check your credit card statements. And as you said, the next way is through phishing attacks and through being duped and people masquerading as other people. If someone calls you and states they are a trusted authority, please remember people do impersonate organizations. Even if they tell you they're from ScamWatch, please say you will call the organization, look up the number, make sure it's the right number, call them and say you were spoken to by person X and perhaps a reference number was obtained, but do not respond with personal data over the phone, such as bank account information, even if someone is telling you they're trying to help you. This is the amazing thing going on here. The scams are getting sophisticated, and then the data breaches through the organizations that are recurring, and organizations having to declare data breaches in a mandatory capacity. And even this year alone, worldwide, there have been more than 1 billion passwords stolen from various attacks all over the world. So they're obviously gaining escalation, and we just can't rely on passwords anymore. So please do change those passwords frequently and don't use the same password across different applications.
If people are thinking, what does it really matter if someone takes my data? What can the potential consequences be? A lot of people don't seem to be too worried about handing over a lot of their information to companies that then gets sold on databases and then eventually can sometimes leak out.
Well, identity fraud in the first place, and anyone subjected to this knows how difficult it is to claim in a bona fide way that they are the person they claim to be. And we have seen the massive reaction from the federal government, but also organisations when we, saw the multiple attacks we've had on Australian infrastructure, whether it's been the Optus, Medibank Private or other attacks. We could mention many where Medicare card numbers were taken, driver's licence numbers were taken, and even passports. And so the stakes are getting higher, and it's not just about financials anymore. I'd say it's about geopolitics to an extent, and even the destabilisation of a nation state. But going back to your specific question, well, what's happening? When large organizations are being breached and we are subjected to a breach, there's been attacks now on critical infrastructure. We can point to the US where AT&T had a data leak exposed of 73 million accounts. Change Healthcare hackers stole substantial amount of data from hundreds of millions of individuals who needed prescription medicines. And the supply chain was actually crippled and brought to a standstill. So people didn't get their medicines within 3 or 4 days. Well, for someone that could be life-threatening. There was the Synovus ransom attack, which sparked widespread outages at hospitals across London. And again, based on people's health, you know, and then the Ticketmaster, which most of us in Australia were actually caught up in. If we've gone to watch a football match and book through Ticketmaster, 560 million records worldwide were taken through the Snowflake hack. And what can occur is your data ends up on the dark web. And how might it be used? Well, it's anyone's guess. But increasingly, well, what happens when our biometrics potentially will be stolen? We need to secure these kinds of last defenses, because what after biometrics? You know, if they're going to be used in deep fakes or other kinds of scams or other kinds of unsolicited transactions.
With biometrics, you're talking about facial recognition or iris recognition or all that sort of stuff. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, particularly fingerprints and facial recognition. And we've had scams. I mean, I'm going to quote some numbers here. Chilean company, a mining company, had $1.5 million US stolen from it when an employee impersonated as the CEO. We then had deep fakes being used in scams where amounts up to $25 million or 622,000 US dollars were being transferred because the person on the other side of a Zoom call through a deep fake video thought it was their boss commanding them to do something, and it wasn't just the boss that was a deep fake, but it was people around a boardroom. So there's now highly scripted and sophisticated deep fakes happening where people identify a target victim, they create a script in the spoken language of how they're going to target individuals. Then they go out and initiate a phishing email. Someone bites and responds. They have this gut feeling, oh, this looks a bit odd, but they still continue because it looks legitimate. Even the voice or the words on the page are similar to that of a CEO or a financial controller. So obviously people are studying even the way people write, you know, their original and unique persona of writing style to try and conduct these very sophisticated deep fakes, and finally being duped. While you think you're talking to somebody online, it's not actually them. And so we've had these instances now where police have investigated 4 or 5 major deep fake scams, particularly in Asia, where they've actually succeeded in the transference of millions of dollars. So it's no longer a localized thing, and your image is no longer just your face, you know. It can be incorporated into deep fakes using AI-generated imagery.
Who's winning this race, Katina? You know, we all think it's almost a little bit it's kind of romantic and the stuff of movies that big corporations and maybe even the military, they go out and they employ the hackers to fight on the side of good instead of evil. But, I mean, where are we? Who's winning this war? Who's holding the technology that can be used for such heinous purposes?
I'm going to have to say the hackers are winning so far, and the stakes are being raised, and there's a big debate in sort of behind the scenes saying, should we be paying these hackers, shut them up, give us back our data and tell them to go on their way? But the more we do that, the more we're enticing them to future honeypots of money. But I am going to say AI is probably winning at the moment, not even the humans. And what we've got to bring back is this notion of interdisciplinary responses. Obviously, the cybersecurity experts are doing fantastic in the technical domains. We need more diversity of response, and that'll come actually through community engagement. I'm going to say the way we win this war is by greater awareness and education, building capacity among citizens, building better capabilities within organizations, and making this not a blame game. You know, it's the citizens' fault for clicking on that phishing email, whereas we might be holding organizations accountable and service providers for actually proliferating these scams on our, you know, massive number of vectors of growth of digital devices, whether it's our smartphone, whether it's an iPad, whether it's an email, whether it's LinkedIn, whatever it is, our social media accounts. We've got to start getting smarter. And I'm going to say, I'm going to look to the community for answers and interdisciplinarity. I'm going to say, what's the possibilities here? And our tech people think one way, but we've got to bring in the humanities, the social sciences, and the legal scholars to go and psychologists actually, and to say, how can we win this war? How at least can we better address the issues that are occurring? And we don't just see this as a technical problem. There's a social dimension to this and an environmental, regulatory dimension to this, and it's all a grey zone. But when we bring these silos together, traditional silos together, and start thinking in a non-traditional way in how we're going to combat these, that's when I think we're going to be more successful than the present.
That's how we'll beat the hackers. Maybe.
You betcha.
Yeah, I hope so. Oh, Katina, it's so frightening thinking that there will come a time where we are unsure of whether we can trust anything at all that we see online, unless it's flesh and blood in front of us. You wonder if it'll be a return, maybe, to actual physical shopping and that sort of thing.
I wouldn't be surprised. Already there are people saying, with the deep fakes proliferating online, ask them perhaps to turn their heads slightly so that you can make sure it's not a deep fake. And if they turn their head and you can still see their hairline and their ears quite beautifully and clearly, it's a real person. But if there's a glimmer that happens and a bit of discontinuity in the colouring when someone turns their head, it's a deep fake, because there's not much data on the side of the head as much as there is in the front. So we could get away with deep fakes when we're facing one another, but if you're talking to a deep fake,
around. Yeah, okay.
Turn your head. You might ask the other person on the other side, if they're asking for $25 million, can you just turn your head slightly?
Which is your best side? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, the brave new world. Katina Michael, it'll be fascinating to hear you and others speak tonight. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
That is Professor Katina Michael. Her knowledge in this area is extraordinary, and so you can get along and see her and others speak about this very issue, beating the hackers, at the Music Lounge at the Wollongong Town Hall tonight between 7 p.m. or 8 p.m, or you can register and watch it online to hear more. It's very easy to find via your favourite search engine. It's called Luminaries at the University of Wollongong. You are listening to ABC Illawarra, and it's now 7 o'clock. Let's head to the newsroom.